Hi, everyone, and welcome to the Chicago Techies podcast, a podcast focused on highlighting the voices of Chicago Techies and their experiences. I'm your host, Ceci Fisher-Benitez. Thank you for joining us. On today's episode, I am joined by Safa Shameem, Senior Analyst Implementations at Amount. Hi, Safa. Thank you so much for joining me for this week's episode of the Chicago Techies podcast. I'm so excited to talk to you about your career trajectory and your experience in the tech community. I know that we have a lot in common, and I definitely see a lot of the work that you're doing aside from your work to support your community. So why don't we get started with your name, your pronouns, where you're from, and your current role.
Sounds good. Thanks for having me, Ceci. Excited to be on. Yeah, my name is Safa Shameem. My pronouns are she and her. I am currently from the suburbs, northwest suburbs of Chicago, Schaumburg, and I actually was born in Saudi Arabia. My family immigrated to the United States in the late 90s. So excited to kind of be able to have the American dream, get an education, and really figure out what I always wanted to do in tech.
Amazing. And like I said, definitely a lot in common. I mean, my parents migrated to the US in like the 90s as well. And I likewise myself. So definitely love the immigrant part of, being here and looking for the American dream. But anyway, thank you for sharing that. I definitely did some stalking, and I saw that you are a graduate of UIC. You major in information decision science, which I want to say sounds like a fancy word for data science. So did you know right away that that's what you wanted to study, or did you determine that later on what your major would be?
Yeah, I think I fall in the second camp. I actually started off at UIC as a computer science major and really was kind of just infatuated with the idea of being in tech. Didn't really know what I wanted to do, and I thought software engineering was the only way I could really make an impact in tech. I kind of took a few classes, and actually one of my best friends, we were sitting together in this lecture hall, and I looked over to her and I said, I'm not sure if I want to do this going forward. And I really wanted to find another area of interest that I could apply my skills to. So I was kind of in this just conundrum of like what I wanted to do, and wasn't even sure if I wanted to pursue tech anymore because it was hard. I felt like I didn't have mentors. Oftentimes it was really difficult to navigate the workload balance with multiple math classes, computer classes, programming classes. So I actually stumbled upon a humanities class, and we were researching segregation in the city of Chicago. And I came upon this infographic. It was really well done, and it showed this amazing data analysis of how the cities are kind of broken up by segregation and socioeconomic kind of stats. And I was like, wow, this is such a cool infographic. Like, I want to make something like this. So I think my passion really started kind of right here at home, just analyzing like these issues that are happening in our city. And I was so, curious and empowered to see how people were using data to make an impact, to tell a story. And that's really what led me to my career in information and decision sciences, which is really just a fancy word of like information technology and management information systems, but they're all essentially doing very similar things. It's a concentration of data analysis and business strategy, and also some engineering skills. So really kind of went in with the mindset of wanting to kind of produce a story using data. And I think that really shattered my narrative of tech, because I always thought that you need to be a software engineer to kind of make it in the tech world. And, I don't think a lot of people realize there's a lot of things you can do. And it's just a matter of finding out what drives your passion. So if you're someone who cares about social issues, you can use tech to kind of solve those issues. You can use tech to really empower decisions within your community.
For sure. And that's also an incredible story about how one little infographic kind of like influenced to make that decision. I'm just a little curious on why tech, what sparked that curiosity specifically about tech? Because you technically could have gone in any direction, but you were kind of set on the idea of wanting to kind of explore tech. What was appealing about it?
Yeah, I think my reasoning for going into tech was I'm someone who very much wants to problem solve. And I know there's a lot of different avenues you can do that in, but tech is really changing the way we think about problems, and it's affecting everyone's life in a lot of different ways. So I think what drew me to it was just the possibility of making a really big impact, knowing that I could go into any type of field, and I can use tech to really drive change, whether that's producing a compelling story and narrative on a data analysis I produce for a company or, a social cause. So I think for me, what really drew me to it was just the aspect of how change impacting it is. And I think there's a lot of fields you can do that in, but the thing that makes tech unique is you're really, challenging yourself to learn a lot of different skills. And you're able to use those skills to empower other people to learn as well. So I saw it as a way of like, once I learn these skills, I can also use these tools in my toolkit to share with someone else. And that kind of led to other initiatives that I'm working on today we can discuss. But really, it was just kind of the idea of making a huge change in this industry.
Yeah. I mean, honestly, I feel like that's definitely a well thought out process for you. Mine was just tech is cool. So I appreciate that about you and your willingness to kind of problem solve. That's great. Um, how did you navigate like going toward your first job out of college? Like, did you go the traditional route of applying to internships, or what was that process like? Can you walk me through that?
Yeah, absolutely. Also, full disclosure, like I'm very much an introvert. So the idea of networking really terrified me in college. I would see people, suited up and like ready to go to these networking events. And I thought to myself, man, like, I don't know how I can do that. I'm more quiet, I'm shy, but I really had to kind of not change myself, but kind of step out of my comfort zone. And I think what I did was just literally make a running sheet of like all the places I applied to. I would cold call, email people, just find different ways I could talk to people outside of kind of the university campus. So I think the process was pretty traditional, and it was hard at first because I think a lot of young people feel they have a lot to prove. They don't have any credibility yet. How will an employer choose me over someone who has a lot of experience? So I think there's that fear and a little bit of imposter syndrome. But the thing that really got me through was understanding a lot of this is just a numbers game too. There are things that I applied to that I thought I would never do this, but it's worth a shot. And I think having a growth mindset, so even if you're someone in tech or, business, marketing, whatever it is, kind of applying to everything and seeing what the opportunities are really important. So I think I applied to over 100 places for an internship, only heard back from three, was rejected by one of them and had an offer from two of them. And that really was kind of a sign that, okay, there is opportunity out there. It's hard, but you can do it. And I think a lot of the help I got along the way was from, very strong like female leaders in my community who kind of mentored me to get there.
That's a great segue into this next question, because earlier you did mention that it was a little difficult to find mentorship. And I mean, that I feel like that's really a thing for all students, for everybody. And even as you kind of go into your role, right? Like your first role, or even now, we're always constantly looking for mentorship. And I feel like it's just a hot topic at all times. It doesn't change because of the impact that it has in our careers. So I'm curious about how you basically go about finding your mentors, and how do you approach them, I guess?
Yeah, that's a great question because I think a lot of people, get discouraged if they don't have a mentor, but it really can be a game changer in your career and just getting your foot in the door. How I approached it when I was in my internship, I used to work at a health tech startup as a data analyst, and there weren't that many there were quite a few women on the engineering team, but not as many. And I really would just tell them about my experience, like better optimize my time. And it really became more of a casual talk. And it opened up a lot of doors because I could be myself and more vulnerable in these spaces. And I think it's hard. You have to have this persona at work, but it's really important to find people at work you can talk to about challenges in the workplace or things that are difficult for you, whether it's a project. And more often than not, people are super happy to talk to you because they've been through so many experiences. One advice I do have is find different mentors. If you're someone in tech, it's important that you do have a tech mentor, but find someone in a different area of expertise. Find someone who can offer you a different way of thinking about a problem. I think the more people you talk to that come from different backgrounds that don't look like you, that do look like you, it all is a culmination of kind of everyone's experiences. And I think that will just mold you into a better person in your career.
Yeah, I would definitely have to agree with all of that. And I think that's actually one of the areas that I need to work on my own, is finding those people that are not in our field, right? Like there's a lot of value in folks that work in different areas of expertise that can provide us with a whole different lens. So definitely agree with all of that. I wanted to explore a little bit more like your role, and like, I know that you explained why data science, kind of was your thing, and why it influenced you. But I'm curious to learn about more about it in general, like as in your role, because I believe that you do implementation, right? Can you talk a little bit more about your role and kind of like the day-to-day aspects of it, and how do you like it?
Absolutely. Yeah. So I think previously, before I joined Amount, a lot of my work was in data analytics and kind of producing these really robust visualizations for our product leaders. Um, Prior to that, that's kind of what my experience has been. And then after departing that health tech company, I came to Avant/Amount and really focused on kind of driving client relationships at the bank and making sure there was proper internal reporting. So currently now I join implementations, and I'm focusing on how we can get um, clients to use our technology and suggest best requirements for a solution. So banks will often come to us and say, hey, we really want to use your product. And we will make sure that our product is integrated properly in their system. So a lot of the times this includes, project management. So doing requirement gathering, what are the things that the partner needs? What can we offer? Can we customize a feature? Can we, configure a feature, and understanding what those rail guards are? Implementation work is pretty project management heavy, but ultimately, high level, what you're doing is making sure that our clients, which are banks, can integrate into our technology. And I think the biggest challenge there is, how do we figure out for these banks that their old legacy systems, which have been in place for decades, how can we move them into a much more like digitized and, streamlined process? So, it's like imagining trying to remove a brick from the foundation of a house without disturbing the entire structure, which the brick is supporting. And that's the challenges that banks are facing when they're trying to replace their legacy systems with a fintech solution. So it's exciting. And I think the best part about Amount is there's never a shortage of work. It's extremely challenging being in the fintech industry, and you get to wear a lot of hats. So, it's only been a year and 6 months for me. I've already switched teams, at the year mark, and I'm just excited about growing at the company.
Yeah, that's great. I mean, I used to work at Innova, so I'm very familiar with legacy systems and like a legacy code and all of that, and trying to kind of implement the new things and how everything breaks after you do that.
Yeah, and Innova, a lot of people at Amount and Avant actually worked at Innova. I think some of the leadership transfer there. So they're definitely like all sister companies.
For sure. I feel like, I don't know if this is right. It might not be, but I thought that actually someone that used to work at Innova, and I think it was called something else before, like founded Avant. So I don't know if that's true, but I think I've heard that.
Yeah, that's right. So our CEO, Al Goldstein, he was our CEO at the time. He's our chairman now, but Al Goldstein actually founded Innova. And then after Innova, he did Avant, and then consequently from Avant spun off Amount.
Oh, nice. See, there's a lot of rebirth, I guess, right, for different companies. I wanted to switch gears a little bit to just like professional development, and what do you do to kind of like, I don't want to say stay relevant, because you are relevant, but like how to like upskill and like, how to continue learning, continuous learning. Like, how do you go about finding resources for that?
Absolutely. I think that's something I always have to remind myself, because I think it's really easy for people to get comfortable in their role, and, it's nice, right? But I think if you're comfortable for too long, you're not really outside of your comfort zone. So what I like to do professionally is just find out how I can learn, programming languages more, whether that's through online resources. And it was very daunting at first, but I think the more you can become a self learner, the better off you'll be. And, you know, just advice for people who don't have a technical background or they're not in tech, you can definitely do it. There's so many amazing people who have very unconventional paths to tech. Some of the most incredible people I've met at Amount and the past tech startup I was at before, they didn't study computer science. They weren't engineers. They had very interesting backgrounds, but the thing that made everyone successful, and I think the thing that's really driving my growth too at the moment, is figuring out how I can learn on my own independently. And if that means using a online resource like Udemy or, Coursera, there's tons of free courses out there. And the great thing about those courses is you can go at your own speed and find the best time that works to kind of tackle those courses. The other thing for professional development is kind of what we touched on earlier, which is mentorship. Find people you can learn from. And I think this is downplayed a lot, but technical skills are great. But what makes leaders even more great is the fact that they have those soft skills. So knowing how to work a room and talk to stakeholders and people who are in senior leadership, how do you present to them? And it's very nerve-wracking, especially as, a senior analyst. You have to prove your credibility, especially, if you're not high up in a role. But oftentimes those people are making a lot of impact in the organization. So I would say for just professional development at a high level, it's really just finding resources online. Coursera, Udemy, Harvard Business has a bunch of online courses as well that you can take for free. And the second is, I think, just really finding people you look and aspire to in your career, in your industry, and just connect with them and ask how you can grow.
Yeah, absolutely. And I always mention LinkedIn, LinkedIn being one of those resources where you can find people that are doing the job that you want. And, it doesn't hurt to just like send a request and send a note. I definitely agree with all of that. And you kind of already answered my next question about, what advice you would share with folks looking to get in the industry. So if you want to add anything else, feel free.
Yeah, no, totally. I think one thing I'd want to say is, the thing I've learned so far, and I can't stress this enough, is, you only get what you want by working towards it, and it's never too late to take your first step. And this is for anyone. You don't know what's out there yet, but it's worth taking a chance to explore everything that is out there. And it's totally okay to fail until you find the right thing you want. You will only get closer to your goal if you kind of make those mistakes along the way, as long as you learn from it. And yeah, I think that's the best way to approach it, especially tech. There is a huge learning curve, and there always will be tons of things to learn and never a shortage of work to do. But I think take it a day at a time, focus on one small tangible goal and put a deadline to it and try to accomplish it.
Definitely would agree with all of that. I think the hardest step is to just take it, right? Like the first step is the hardest thing to do. But once you do it, then you're kind of like, you're in it, and you kind of have to learn how to manage, how to swim because you're in the water now. So, and it's, I feel like there's so many people out there that are so open to helping people that, even if you're scared of like not knowing anyone in tech, I know right now we can't go to any networking events, and for a lot of like you mentioned, a lot of introverts, it's really difficult to do that. But like, it doesn't hurt to just like send a blind email, like, or send like a note on LinkedIn. I think I usually, accept all of the requests because I was there at one point. And, so if somebody has a question or somebody just wants to chat for like 10, 15 minutes, I'm going to donate my time for that. Like I will, I think we were all at square one at one point. And I think it's important for us to be able to kind of give back to our communities in that sense. So definitely, if anyone's interested, like, I mean, I'm going to go ahead and volunteer you. Like, if anyone wants to connect, like and learn more about this industry and like in your role, like, I think, they should feel empowered to reach out and just take that one step. So real quickly, I'm very curious about those being a resource, right? And like in finding those resources, like, do you have like a go-to resource, whether it's a book or a blog or a podcast that has kind of influenced your career and has kind of helped you navigate, the industry?
It's interesting. I don't try to read a lot of books within my industry just because I feel like I'm so immersed in it. So I spend a lot of time reading about history and, social causes and issues. But I do think something that helped me was reading a lot of articles in the industry I'm in, and a lot of, scholarly research, if that's just about, in the fintech industry, like what are groundbreaking trends that are happening, what are the industry experts saying. So I think, for books, I'd say it's a pretty wide variety of things I like to read, but specifically to my development and resources, I tell people, there's so much information on the internet. You can get a lot from reading, articles on Harvard Business Review, NPR, Y Combinator, which is a startup school in the Bay Area. They have a lot of great resources for people who want to know how do you become a founder? How do you create a startup? I think that's something that's kind of close to me personally because I'm in the startup ecosystem. So I really like learning about things that affect startups. And I'd say there's a lot of resources online. So definitely check out, articles from like Y Combinator. There's a lot of startup, I guess, influencers, I'd say, that I really look up to. Paul Graham, he's the co-founder, one of the co-founders of Y Combinator. Jessica Livingston. There's a lot of incredible people from there.
I was writing their names down to make sure that I put it on under the resources page. Yeah, that's great. I do like reading a lot of articles too. I don't know if how many people know. I think most people know though. But in the next 5 or so years, I want to transition into a DEI role, and kind of help build that whole ERG system, or at least finding a way that for companies to become more inclusive. So I've been doing a lot of reading on DEI practices, and following some local people here like Michelle Bass, and yeah, it's been really rewarding to read other people's work. I think there's definitely a lot of value that for yourself and also for companies. So the Y Combinator sounds like a great one, and I believe that Code for America has used that actually, because they oftentimes write about civic tech too, and they're in volunteering and like engaging with people. So I think it's like a good resource for a lot of different things. And also, so you're very much involved also in your community. I noticed that you are one of the co-founders of Muslim Women in Tech, along with Zara Adher, right?
Yes.
And let me just read really quickly, like the mission, I guess, like of Muslim Women in Tech, because I think it's great, and I feel like we could probably do a better job at the Latinos in Tech one. But yours is to create a network for current and future female leaders across all industries by developing connections, learning together, and sharing opportunities for career advancement. That's awesome. I love it. And I was hoping you could walk us through like that experience of creating that organization and kind of like the impact that it has had in your career.
Yeah, that's a great question. I think honestly, it's great you mentioned Latinas in Tech, Latinos who code, because those are kind of model groups we actually wanted to emulate ourselves after. And I think a lot of these groups have paved the way for us. So it was really just understanding how can we build this for our own community. And it literally happened after I graduated the University of Illinois at Chicago. I had just finished, a new job and was adjusting to it. Sarah Author, my co-founder, and I sat together in a coffee shop, and we were thinking to ourselves, there's so many incredible women in tech, specifically minorities in tech as well. How can we create a space that connects everyone to each other? And not even just that, how can we make sure that they have the same chance as another person getting a job? And I think that's what really fueled the passion. And I was very overwhelmed at first because I thought, I'm so young, I don't know if I can do this on my own. And there was a bit of, fear and kind of starting something new and from scratch. But I think the best piece of advice from that was just start something, even if it's not the prettiest, even if, it's just getting people together in a room and talking. And that's exactly what we did. Our first event was at this great coffee shop in Wicker Park called Brew. The owners kindly allowed us to host an event there. And you wouldn't believe it, Ceci, but there were over 50 people who came into this coffee basement, and it was amazing. There were men, there were women of color, there were Muslim women. It was just this outpour of support. And I thought to myself, wait, I think we're onto something here. And I think the goal of Muslim Women in Tech is, yes, we want to help support Muslim women who don't really have a voice, being heard in tech spaces often, but making sure that we're working with other minority groups too. And it's really kind of an intersectional group. So while we do champion, Muslim women to have their voices heard, we also want to champion these other groups as well. So, I think it's really awesome that you mentioned Latinas in tech, because a lot of those groups were the blueprint for us. And it was really inspiring to see how successful they were. And I think at the end of the day, like everyone wants kind of the same thing. They just want to be connected and have their voice heard. And oftentimes those people are invisible in workspaces.
Yeah, absolutely. And I would have to agree about, all of us, all minorities really should be in it together, right? Like we're looking for the same thing, experience, everything. So I actually, I would love to partner with Muslim Women in Tech and maybe even do something like this coming up. We're actually working right now or having conversations with General Assembly about hosting a Women in Tech event for Women's History Month, and not just partnering with them when it's Hispanic Heritage Month. Like so it's something that I usually like to call out, but yeah, I would love to have you all on board for that too, and see what we can make. I think it's great that there are so many groups kind of coming aboard and helping and giving a hand in their own communities. And I think this experience for you is likely the same thing for me. I think it also opens a lot of doors. A lot of people are interested in the work that you do, and they really want to see it be successful. So yeah, I'm really excited to finally hear more about this and the work that you guys have been doing. Do you all meet monthly, or is it just quarterly, or what's the rhythm of your calendar, I guess?
Yeah, so the cadence for our events, we try to do on average 2 events per month. And the exciting thing is we're really trying to challenge their narrative of tech. We include women who are product managers at top tier tech companies, consulting companies. We'll do data scientists. We had a past event, which was really exciting. We partnered with Muslim urban professionals. They're a group called Muppies, and we had this event with tech founders. So it was people who started their own companies, and they talked about the challenges of funding and how to get access to funding as minorities. So our events are really just a reflection of our community and the diversity. We try to host events in, data science, product management, software engineering, really just trying to kind of push that narrative. And I think the most exciting thing about our events is it's become so frequent now. We have kind of a calendar on our website where you guys can sign up for events. We have a pretty active Instagram page and Twitter where we're kind of posting content to make sure people feel, like they're part of a community. We also have a Slack channel, so that's open to anyone. So would love to partner with Code for America, Latinas in Tech, and see how we can collaborate.
Absolutely. Yeah, Code for America, I feel like it's easier to collaborate with likely the brigades. Like Code for Chicago, we'd be happy to partner and put together an event or maybe build something, because that's really what we do. We partner with different organizations to make either new applications or things work better. So I think it would be really cool to do something like that for sure. I imagine that being Muslim too, for especially within this group, there's some challenges that everybody goes through, and I mean it is definitely for Latinas in tech. We oftentimes talk about how challenging work can be or workspaces, because obviously it's very male dominated, and obviously we're all minorities. So I'm kind of curious to learn about some of the challenges that you've encountered, and not necessarily for being a Muslim woman in tech, but just in general, whichever you like to share.
Absolutely. And I think this is really timely just given the current climate that has been kind of accumulating in this country. But, particularly as a minority and being Muslim, one of the things I have at work has been really supportive as a manager who understands, what bothers me, or things that affect my work life quality. And I think having ERG groups is really important. And the challenges I face is just making sure I have a group, whether it's at work, outside of my home, someone I could talk to about things I'm frustrated with or that I need guidance with. And oftentimes I think some of the challenges minorities face is just not having their voices heard. And how do we have access to, the same level of promotion as, our Caucasian counterparts? And it's just making sure everyone has that even level playing field. And I think how we can get there is just having more ERG groups. And I think at work, it's been really helpful for me is just talking to people who also have similar struggles and making sure that, their voices are heard.
Yeah, I would agree with all of that. I feel like ERGs are often like a really great resource for anyone that just joined a company or anyone that is like looking to improve like their quality of work, I guess, experience, right? I'm curious to learn a little bit more about your experience there overall as a culture. How is Amount now?
Yeah, no, that's a great question. Amount is really great in terms of supporting minorities, inclusion efforts, and just obtaining more diversity at the company. Yeah, I worked pretty closely with some of our ERGs to host a Muslim Women in Tech actually at Avant last December, and they were so supportive. Cece, they were just amazed that there was this group out there, and they said, "Wow, we would love to host Muslim Women in Tech and kind of support minorities in any way we can." So my experience has been really good. I think just from an inclusion perspective, I've always felt like I've had a seat at the table, whether it's talking about, issues in the workplace or how we can make a more inclusive environment, especially now that things are remote. I think it's hard to kind of manage that. And it's been really a great experience. The past 1 year and 6 months has just been incredible with Amount because they really want you to grow and they're invested in you. So by nature, if they're invested in you, they want you to feel like you're at home.
Yeah, I imagine that because so I actually have heard I've been invited to speak there as for an LGBTQ panel a few months ago, but then COVID happened and they had to postpone it. But I was really excited to be considered for that, and obviously they also have offered to host Latinas in Tech for events there. So I'm really excited to go back there when we're finally able to meet people and like see people in person. I think that'll be great. I wanted to ask a little bit about you and your goals. Like what's next for Safa? What are your goals for the future?
Yeah, I know. I'm someone who just lives in the present. So whenever someone asks me this question, I have to really think about who do I want to be in 5 years? What do I want to do? But it is something I've been thinking about. And I think the thing that drives me is just my passion for being in the startup ecosystem. It's a great place. I think for anyone who wants to be in tech, join a startup. You will get so much value, whether you have experience in tech or not. It's a great place to just start from the ground up. So I think I'd love to, maybe it is going to Y Combinator startup school or, you know, starting my own company someday. But I think I'm very much intrigued with the idea of hoping to start, my own startup someday with ideas that I have. And I think that's a piece of advice too, is if you have an idea and you think someone hasn't probably thought of it yet, you might be wrong. And I'd say really just make sure you take note of your ideas because they're all really valuable and important in today's society. Other than that, I definitely have kind of a desire to go to business school. I'd love to get my MBA because I think we need more women in leadership. And, an MBA is one way to get there. So I'd love to, kind of think about that in the future and see how I can use a business degree to kind of elevate myself and other women in leadership positions.
For sure, we definitely need more women founders. So it sounds great. You heard her here first. Safa is going to create her own startup eventually. That's so cool. I would definitely love to follow that journey and learn more about what you decide to do in the future. That sounds great. Now, I mean, I think I want to give an opportunity for people to connect with you. So what's the best place to connect with you? Is it LinkedIn, Twitter, any Instagram? Do you have all of those?
Yeah, no, I'm honestly, Cece, you know how I connected with you. I just started following you because I thought you were so cool. But honestly, I'm very much approachable. Please feel free to connect with me on LinkedIn. Cece, you have my Twitter, but my Twitter is also accessible. It's public. Feel free to connect with me on Instagram as well. I'm happy to share those handles too. It's Safa_Shameem for most of my accounts, but happy to share that.
Yeah, and I'll make sure to link everything on the show notes. But this is great. Thank you so much, Safa, for coming to the show. I really appreciate it. I'm really thankful that you decided to follow me because otherwise I wouldn't have known that you had this organization. I eventually probably would have get there, but I really love the power of social media and how it can connect us even when we don't know each other yet. This is actually the first time we're meeting. Before we've been following each other for a while, but we've never actually had a conversation. So this is great.
Absolutely. No, this was such a pleasure. And I just want to say thank you so much for empowering voices, especially those of minorities, which often don't get heard. And It's incredible to see the work that you're doing. And I'm honestly very inspired about you myself. And I'm really glad we could connect.
Thank you so much. I appreciate that, Safa. We'll talk soon.
Talk soon. Thank you.
Thank you for listening to this week's episode of the Chicago Techies podcast. If you enjoyed listening, don't forget to subscribe, share, and leave a review on iTunes. Let's continue the conversation on Twitter and Instagram. Follow us at Chicago Techies on all social media channels. Thank you again, and we'll see you in 2 weeks.